Good evening, everybody. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, if you'd take the roll call.
Councilmember Bill De La Pena.
Present.
Councilmember Engler.
Present.
Councilmember Jones.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Adam.
Here.
Mayor McCoy.
Present. Now we've got some special presentations, so I'll move to the dais. Well, tonight we have two special presentations, and before we have the presentation from John Short, I did want to recognize in the audience tonight the Kaufman family. They are the parents of one of the borderline victims, Cody. Where's the Kaufman family? Would you stand up? We're just so blessed to have you with us. God bless you guys. Jason and I had the chance, sadly, that night to get to know each other, and now we've become very close friends. And I'm sorry for your loss, but I have to tell you, you all have been instrumental in the healing in our community. And I know your son didn't get a chance to meet his new little sister, but she is sure adorable. Congratulations. You bet. Tonight we have a special presentation from community member John Short, amazing guy. And John, where are you, John? Come on, join me at the podium. Red Rover, come on over. John, please tell us about the Borderline t-shirt sales. I know a number of my family and friends bought a grip of them. Tell us about them. Come on up.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council members, staff. My name is, as Mayor said, John Short, resident of Thousand Oaks. Wednesday, November 7th, 2018, at approximately 11:20, our community was under attack. That night had many heroes. We have heard many stories of the selfless acts that occurred to save the lives of others, stories of individuals helping others to safety only to lose their lives, as well as Sergeant Helis, who paid the ultimate sacrifice to save the lives of many. The next morning, we went from shock and disbelief to how can we make a difference. News traveled fast, and there was a vigil that night. Several of my friends started texting with the idea of designing a t-shirt for Borderline to show support. These friends were all volunteers of the American Cancer Society. For many years, Brian, the owner of Borderline, provided his venue for us to host a benefit concert entitled Give Cancer the Boot. As a show of support, I contacted Eastwind Screen Prints and printed 10 TO Strong Rally Around Borderline t-shirts. I joined the staff at Borderline for the vigil. As we were leaving, many asked, where could we find those shirts? And thus, that journey began. The next morning, I contacted Rick, the owner of Eastwind Screen Prints, again to start printing the shirts. And his staff began running 3 screen printers from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m., 7 days a week for over 3 weeks. He turned his shop into the retail store, and many volunteers from the community began to show up. At the height of the sales, we sold over 50,000 t-shirts in one day. We had dozens of volunteers from Thousand Oaks and surrounding communities, and more than 20 volunteers on any given day folding, selling, printing, and shipping shirts across the United States and across the world. 15 different businesses were selling shirts, and the volunteers were invited to attend 23 different events to sell shirts, hats, and sweatshirts. I set a goal that would be a stretch to say the least, but a goal that would make a difference in the lives of many. For all that volunteered, it was a rewarding experience, a way to show not only the community, but the world, that we may be a small community by sheer numbers, but we are truly mighty by the amount of love and respect we have for each other and the pride we have by taking care of our own. There are many fundraisers for both the fire families and the borderline families, but none with the passion, grassroots efforts, and widespread support of the borderline T-shirt sales. This was truly a fundraising effort that was driven by the community near and far. The shirts have gone across Thousand Oaks, Ventura County, the United States, and beyond. We have shipped shirts as far away as England, France, Afghanistan, showing support of our great community. Before we get to the final chapter of this evening's presentation, there are several individuals I'd like to recognize. First, this individual put all his orders on hold for almost a month to make sure that we could print and ship Borderline shirts. We worked 7 days a week for almost 2 months, only taking off for Thanksgiving and Christmas. Rick Beccaria, the owner of Eastwind, and all of his staff, would you please stand? There you go. Come on, guys. Come on, stand up. There are many volunteers throughout this journey, and for that we will all be grateful. Tonight I brought the A-Team. These individuals showed up every day to help out with the sales and shipping efforts of the Borderline T-shirts. These are the folks that worked their regular day jobs and then showed up for a 5 to 8 hour shift at night. We're the volunteers. Please stand. There were many heroes that night on November 7th, including our first responders, several that were here this evening. These are the men and women that go out each and every day to protect and serve. I'd like to recognize Police Chief Hagel and Battalion Chief John Spikerman for your leadership through what was by far the most challenging events our community has ever faced. We'd like to give you folks a round of applause. And finally, I want to take a moment to recognize a very special individual, an individual that has always put himself, or put service before self, an individual that is dedicated to making the world a better place, a person that has raised hundreds of thousands of dollars each and every year for local charities. He does not want fame. He does not want recognition. He is only concerned about those around him. For several months, I've gained a much deeper respect and appreciation for all that he has done and will continue to do for those affected by November 7th. A quote from the New Testament, Galatians chapter 6, verse 9. So let us not get tired of doing what is good. At just the right time, we will reap and harvest of blessings if we don't give up. We never gave up. We charged forward, and the blessings that have been bestowed upon each of our volunteers has been bountiful, including what we have learned from a very good friend of mine, my true country western star, the owner of Borderline, Mr. Brian Hines. Everyone can be great because they can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to have a subject and verb agree to serve. You only have to have a heart full of grace and a soul generated by love. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. To the families that lost loved ones that fateful evening, our thoughts and prayers go out to each of you. If I can share one last thought, as Dr. Martin Luther King said, anyone can serve. We as a community serve each other. We as a community have hearts full of grace. We as a community have souls generated by love. And we as a community will be there for each other and the countless others affected by the Borderline tragedy as well as the fires. We are TEAL strong. We are Borderline strong. God bless each of you this evening. May God grant strength and help our community heal, and may God bless America. At this time, with your permission, Mayor, I'd like to bring down Gene Archer from the Westlake Rotary, Brian Hines and his team, and every volunteer that picked up, shipped, touched a T-shirt. Please come down here because we have something to present. Thank you.
Well, John, you said everything, but I will say this last part. A lot of folks have come into our community to try to profit from our grief, and any donkey can knock down a barn door, but only a carpenter can build one. And piece by piece, with all of your efforts, you're starting to rebuild our community. And we're still hurting. And I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you on behalf of a grateful city. And Rotary, take care of those folks with that, all right? And let's take a picture of the council, if you guys will come on up. Back up towards the dais, and we'll get you all in there for the photo. You got to squeeze in. Let's do this quick, because we'll finish at midnight otherwise. This way. Get on the red carpet. Squeeze in. Got to get closer. Head up. Got to get in. Here you go, brother man.
Thank you, brother man. God bless you, man.
You too. Thank you, John. For our next presentation, I'd like to invite Ted Bardacke to come on up. He's the Executive Director of the Clean Power Alliance. He's coming to the podium to provide an update to Thousand Oaks enrollment into the Clean Power Alliance. And I'm going to go back to the dais, Ted. You're going to field questions, and welcome, and thank you for coming out. Of course.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Thanks for having me out. I'm Ted Bardacke. I'm Executive Director of Clean Power Alliance. Thank you, Claudia, for the invitation. Claudia's been representing your city on our 31-member board ably and with passion, so appreciate the opportunity to come out tonight and give you a little update about where we are, given that we've now started service here in Thousand Oaks, and the lights are still on. So thanks to all of our new customers. So just a little, I understand that you all may have some questions, so I'm going to try to run through the basics pretty quickly and just provide an update of where we are. But just to back up, Clean Power Alliance, our mission is to provide energy choice that's locally controlled, and that communities are empowered to reach our environmental goals in a way that adheres to local priorities. And so the way this works is that we purchase electricity, we develop renewable energy projects, and sell it to the end-use customer, and in the middle remains Southern California Edison, who controls the lines and the wires. So if you think about it, an easy way to think about it is that Edison's the cable company and we're the content provider. And we're providing a choice about what kind of content you want to see coming over those lines and wires. And that's how it works. It's how it works around the state, regardless of whether you're in PG&E, SCE, or San Diego Gas and Electric territory. We really provide two kinds of choices to the customer. The first choice is, do you want to stay with Clean Power Alliance? Do you want to stay as part of our service? So that's the opt-out or stay-in process. So that's the first choice that we offer customers, in or out. And then if you've decided to stay in, you have a choice of 3 rates. Now, one of the things we have lean power, clean power, and 100% green power, and they come at different price points with different levels of renewable energy. One of the things we offer to our communities is that every community gets to choose the default rate. That is, if a customer does nothing, what happens? So if a customer does nothing here in Thousand Oaks, your council chose 100% green power. That's 100% carbon-free, pollution-free power as your default rate. And that was an incredible leadership decision on behalf of your community, for future generations. But we also see a number of customers in your territory in particular choosing these other rates, and I'll show some statistics about that. In fact, you have the most engaged community of any one of my 31 member agencies in terms of how people are electing to make these choices. But just to remind about where we are in the launch process, so in February, on everybody's meter read date in February, they've for folks who haven't opted out, they cut over to Clean Power Alliance, and they'll be getting their first bills with our line item. It's the same Edison bill. It's just still one bill, but we now have a line item on the bill. Will start to arrive in March for people's February bills. So over the course of February, we're rolling people on, and over the course of March, people will start to see their first bills. So in terms of engagement, I wanted to show you as of Friday where you were in terms of what choices customers were making here in Thousand Oaks. And I'll provide some interesting context. You know, you all, your staff, particularly Helen here, has, along with Clean Power Alliance staff, have really been out in the community. Helen was doing office hours at the library right up before February began. We've been active on social media. We've been active with the Acorn, really trying to get the word out about what these choices are. And what is interesting is that you've got just about over 46,000 eligible residential customers, and 7,000, or almost close to 15, 16%, have made a choice, which is quite phenomenal when you think that most people don't tend to interact with their electricity bills. So we have now, a number of folks, and Helen can talk about some of her experiences at the library, was really educating people not just about Clean Power Alliance, but how their energy system works, what their bills look like, what kind of rates they're on, that this has been an educational process here in the community. The other thing I'll note is that almost 4% of your eligible customers have decided to take not the 100% rate or even the middle rate, but the least expensive rate, which is cheaper than Southern California Edison. So for those folks who are really price conscious, we are offering a choice to them to save money. The other thing I wanted to remind about the rates is that the way they're structured is that the 100% green rate comes at no additional cost. We're providing it at the same rate as Edison to any customer who's on CARE or FARA, which are the low-income rates, and to the seniors who are on medical baseline. So those folks will get the same 100% renewable energy product for the same amount that they would be otherwise paying Edison. One question that's come up is, how are we dealing with customer interaction? Well, we see a lot of action on our website, but we also have 60 call center representatives who are available to answer calls. Just in January alone, we fielded over 11,000 calls at the call center and kept average wait times down to less than 20 seconds. So we're we're responsive, and we're getting good feedback in addition to the specific outreach that has been done here in the community. One of my staff was out at your Council on Aging just the other night and made a really good presentation to your seniors, some of whom were concerned, obviously, about what happens to their electricity bills and needed some specific information. So we've been out there. Just in closing, before I take any questions, I just wanted to remind you sort of the value proposition, like why go through all of this change and disruption. So stable, competitive rates. So our risk management and our business policy is actually quite more conservative than Southern California Edison, and we, as we get up and running, we should be able to provide more stability in addition to the competitive rates. The higher renewable content, so obviously we're providing a more green product, but one of the things that happens is as the customers choose the more green product, that's a signal to us to go out and procure more renewable energy. The more long-term contracts that we can sign for renewable energy, we're talking about 10-year, 15-year contracts, that drives the price down. That drives the premium down that we're paying for renewable energy over time for rate savings, as well as spurring economic development here in Southern California. So it's a win-win there. And then, of course, local management and control. As we start to roll out local programs, we're going to be very attuned and interested in what the local priorities are, whether it's for electric vehicle chargers or smart thermostats or energy storage for resiliency during times of crisis or fire. We really like to hear from you all about what those local priorities are, and we can start to deliver on them over time. So I'll stop there and see if anybody has any questions.
Councilmember Bilda La Peña?
Thank you, Mayor McCoy. Ted, thank you for coming all the way to Thousand Oaks. And yes, we have a very engaged community. The number one concern or complaint was that people didn't like being given this new energy plan. They were complaining that they're being forced to accept it when in fact they do have a choice. Mm-hmm. Why was there an opt-out rather than an opt-in?
Yeah. Thank you. So the state law that was passed in 2002 that allowed community choice aggregation to occur and be created mandated the automatic opt-in part of the program, and the reason for that is that the community choice aggregation was actually historically came out of the California's energy crisis, and it was thought that local communities could actually provide more reliable power than what was happening during deregulation. And that has proven to be the case among our fellow CCAs that have been in Northern California. I will say that it has been the subject of some debate, and there were two efforts to change it. There was actually a ballot proposition in 2008 that asked for a vote of the people in order to opt into a program like this, and that was defeated at the ballot box. And then there was an effort in the state legislature to change it as well, and that was also defeated in the state legislature. So right now, it's that's the way the state law is. There's been a robust debate about it, and if you want into a CCA, that's the way it works.
Thank you for clarifying that. And then, of course, the other concern or complaint was that this would be government-controlled utility. And I would like to offer that we have 3 water companies, so to speak, in the city of Thousand Oaks: California Water Company, the city of Thousand Oaks, and then Cal-Am. The water purveyor with the lowest water rates is the government-controlled entity, namely the city of Thousand Oaks. And with water, you don't have a choice at all. You either, depending on where you move to, you are stuck with the one water purveyor that you have. You cannot switch to the lower rates that the city of Thousand Oaks offers. With CPA, you actually have a choice. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay.
Councilmember Engler?
Yes, thank you for coming out and explaining to everybody the program. It's a laudable goal. I appreciate the goal. However, I have to point out that the execution of that goal was somewhat stumbling. You had thousands of calls to your center asking for questions. In addition to that, are you planning any other community outreach to try to further explain what's happening?
Yes, we're. So customers will have 2 more notices coming in the mail, and we've taken some really good customer feedback about what those the information that customers want to know. So they'll be getting 2 more notices in the mail over the next 30 and 60 days, which will, again, clarify the costs, the way to opt out, so that's the first thing. The city, I know, is going to continue to not only field calls, but do proactive, as well as my staff and out here. We know that there's a lot of stuff on social media, so we've ramped up some of our, frankly, our paid advertising on social media, which is, generates clicks and provides additional information. And then I think the other thing that's going to sort of start to socialize this a bit more in the community is, we're starting to roll on our business customers in May. So we'll be out in the business community early. Karen and I, our regional affairs manager, we just came from some meetings about getting to the business community very early and often before those first notices drop. I think the other thing is, lots of call. I like that lots of calls come into the community to the call center because the average time of a call is close to 10 minutes. So people are engaging, people are asking questions, and I think that that's been really helpful.
Well, we didn't like the calls to the city.
I know.
With relation to the mailer that looked like junk mail, so you got to work on that.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Thank you. One person.
And just for clarification, the city did not design the mailer.
No, we did not.
We had nothing to do with it, and we didn't approve it either. So
Ted, raise
just
your
wanted
hand.
to say-
Say I did it. All right.
Yeah.
We're grateful for what you're doing. Councilmember Adam.
Thank you, Mayor. At the program, as I see, it's very flexible. I mean, as you've stated many times, you can opt out. You can pick a different tier. You could even pick a cheaper tier than where you are now. And if I'm not mistaken, if you opt out, you can, at your discretion, opt back in again, can you not?
Yeah, once you opt out, you have to stay with SCE for at least 12 months.
Is that it?
So
12 months, okay.
we expect once we get through the enrollment and everybody who has opted out has done so, people have generally chosen their rates, that ends up the stabilizing over time, and we will gain customers and we will lose customers. But we think, my priority after we get through the enrollment phase is really to deliver on this value proposition so that people who have stayed with us are happy with the choice that they've made to stay.
And all these choices can be done through the website, correct?
That's correct.
Which
yes.
is
cleanpoweralliance.org.
cleanpoweralliance.org.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Any other questions? Well, I want to say thank you for coming out and sharing with us and giving us some clarity on that. So thank you very much.
Thank you for the invitation.
We're going to take a 5-minute break. We have a matter, and so we'll take a 5-minute break, and then we'll resume with public comments. All right. Thank you for your patience, everybody. Madam Clerk, will you announce public comments, please?
This is a time and place for public comments. A speaker card is available for those wishing to address the City Council regarding items on the agenda or on a subject within the city's jurisdiction. All remarks should be addressed to the council as a whole, and all documents for City Council and the official record should be presented to the City Clerk prior to speaking. Speakers are requested to state their name and community of residence for the record. Under state law, public comment matters may not be considered by the council unless listed on the agenda, but may be referred to the city manager for administrative follow-up. 4 individuals have presented cards, and pursuant to council standards, speakers are allowed 3 minutes. The yellow light displays when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you very much. Our first speaker tonight is Mr. Paul Hubel. I hope I got your last name right. Is it Hubel? Okay. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, member of the councils. My name is Paul Hubel. I'm a journalist, an investigative journalist. I'm a private investigator. I'm also a former Chicago cop. I want to begin with telling you the government run in secret is both dangerous and un-American. First, let me give you a quick history lesson. During the 1950s and 60s, the FBI ran a program, a secret program called COINTELPRO. And our esteemed FBI engaged in wholesale break-ins, wiretapping, witness tampering, perjury, and hiding evidence. They had their evil deeds all documented in their FBI reports. The targets of COINTELPRO were none other than Martin Luther King and Muhammad Ali and so many others. Finally, in 1971, something amazing happened. Radicals burglarized the Media, Pennsylvania field office of the FBI, and they stole documents that they found, and these documents wound up in the hands of Congress and the press. Fast forward to today. All police reports and witness statements involved in the mass killing at the borderline are shrouded in absolute secrecy. There are rampant rumors. Some came from cops involved in the investigation and others from witnesses. They are all very disturbing. We do know that there were state-of-the-art surveillance cameras in the venue, and not only are they not releasing the video, but the sheriff personally told me that he won't release or tell us what was on the video. We know there are volumes of reports and witness statements, but they're locked away from the media, you, and most importantly, the public. There were as many as 10 off-duty cops in the venue. Many of them were armed. None confronted the gunman. We need to learn who the heroes were and who disappointed the people that they were sworn to protect. Last but not least, we know that the patrons of the borderline had no viable emergency exits. They were forced to break out large plate glass windows, and then they had to jump in the darkness onto the broken glass, and many sustained horrific injuries. Why were there no emergency exits? Who's investigating the physical safety failures at the venue? The heroic police officer, Sergeant Helas, his family, and the other victims deserve the answers. Please, I beg you to do your jobs and end this cover-up. Thank you very much.
Next will be Mr. Bruce Boyer. After Mr. Boyle will be Cheryl Heisent. Hello. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Bruce Boyer. I'm from Chatsworth Lake Manor, and yes, I am a fully filed candidate for Sheriff of Ventura County. The good news is tomorrow afternoon, the California Appellate Court is going to hear my case that will restore the right of all citizens to run for our public office of county sheriff, which is what our state constitution says. So we are going to have an election for sheriff in this county, not a one name on the ballot. Now, I also would like to speak about the borderline. There are a number of very informative videos up at Bruce Boyer for Sheriff. Some of those videos will say that you'll watch the following. You'll watch Chief of Police of Oxnard, Whitney, give his report to his city council. He states there were 2 on-duty Oxnard police officers inside the borderline when shots were fired. He says it twice. His official report. I tend to believe that what he said was what he meant to say. That's the truth. Now, I'd like to know how 2 on-duty police officers do not engage one guy with a handgun. This is a smear on every police officer. If there are 2 cowards, they need to be called out and dealt with. This is a smear on every good officer that is not a coward. So then you'll see a video of a press conference from the appointed sheriff, Mustache Billy Ube. Billy Ube asked the question people have asked of these 8 off-duty officers, 2 and 8 is 10, were they armed? He then proceeds to ramble around and doesn't answer his own question. This city council, I would think, would want him front and center in public, answer the question. When I have officers that I encounter that tell me they know who those 10 unnamed cops are, they know that officers were armed, they know these officers ran, they are ashamed that the cowards are not being punished. Reward the heroes, punish the cowards. These witness statements document who was on duty, who was off duty, who was armed, and exactly what they did. The people have a right to know and to hold people accountable. You all can push to make that happen. If I get sworn in as sheriff, there isn't anybody that doubts I will bring the truth out. There is going to be litigation. Is the city covering things up? There's a man right here that has that video. He could make it public. The people have a right to know. I understand there were people in the borderline as patrons that tried to take out the gunman unarmed. Well, armed cops ran. Those people are heroes and need to be recognized.
We got to put a
Thank
caboose. You bet. Thanks, man. Lady Cheryl, you're up next. You got a cowboy hat too. Welcome.
Thank you. I hope to lighten it up just a little bit here. I'll start with yeehaw, because that's what I usually do when I talk about the Crop Hunger Walk. So good evening to Mayor McCoy and esteemed council people. And Mayor McCoy, that name just kind of rolls off your tongue like Sheriff Cheryl, and that's what I am. I'm Sheriff Cheryl, and I'm the recruiter for the Crop Hunger Walk that's coming up on March the 3rd. So I want to tell you a little bit about that. As I say, I'm the recruiter, so I'm recruiting walkers, which I call my posse for the Crop Hunger Walk. It is the 41st local Crop Hunger Walk here in Conejo Valley, which is awesome, and it's actually the 50th anniversary of the original Crop Hunger Walk. And the purpose of it is to raise funds which help raise awareness and funds which help in giving assistance to alleviate hunger and help in disaster situations and displacement areas in the world, and to improve sanitation. Donations from over 800 national walks go to Church World Service, which sends teams. It's a nonprofit organization which sends teams to poverty-stricken pockets in the world to help them build sustainable living conditions. And 25% of what our walk earns here in the community returns to support 4 local hunger agencies. MANA is one of them. There are 2 Meals on Wheels projects that we support, and also Lutheran Social Services that deal with the homeless. The walk details, again, it's on March 3rd, Sunday. Starts and ends at CLU, California Lutheran University, at the sports complex. It is either a 6-mile walk for the hardy people, 2.4-mile walks if you're just not quite have all that energy, and if you have a twisted ankle or maybe you're over 80, you can do a 20-minute campus stroll. So we have every kind of possibility for anybody that would like to join us.
Does that campus stroll come with an electric cart?
Yeah, it could be, whatever we want.
I'm in.
We can, wheelchairs, we'll get you going, okay? Last year, we had over 300 walkers, and we raised over $33,000, which was awesome. So and we have over 25 clubs and groups, churches that are represented, excuse me. And so I invite the City Council to be present and to be recognized at the March 3rd event. And I have in my hand extra information and donation envelopes, which I will leave over here.
All right.
And again, it's a 3-in-1 event. Number one, it's good for your health, a good walk, right? It serves the community and it serves the world. So I'd love to see all of you there. And again, yeehaw!
Yeehaw. Thank you for your continued boundless energy and service to our community. Speaking of that, Jill Lederer, serving in the community, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor McCoy, Thousand Oaks City Council and city staff. Jill Lederer, Greater Conejo Valley Chamber of Commerce, 600 Hampshire Road. I am here tonight because the people you normally see, our directors of government affairs and tourism, are out representing the Conejo Valley at Visit California's Outlook Forum. So it's my pleasure to be here tonight to give you a little bit of a chamber update. First of all, we have coming up our annual gala on March 1st at the Hyatt Regency. This is one of the great community events of the last 65 years. This is where we recognize men and women in business and nonprofits of the year. And this year I want to share some of those recipients with you here tonight. Past Men of the Year have included great community leaders like Dennis Gillette, Jeff Dean, Dr. Chris Kimball from Cal Lutheran. And this year's Man of the Year, he's not happy about it, but we're doing it anyway. It is our own police chief, Tim Hagel. Woo. Quite a bit more gracious in her acceptance of the honor that we're presenting to her. Our Woman of the Year for this year, following also in great footsteps of many great Women of the Year, Frances Prince, Dr. Hannah Grossman, our own mayor, former Mayor Claudia Bill de la Peña. This year's Woman of the Year, the smartest woman in every room, Tracy Noonan. Our Business of the Year was actually a tie this year. One of them shouldn't be hard to guess. Our own hometown, Los Angeles Rams. Woo. And also being honored this year, Mustang Marketing, just a wonderful marketing company based in Newbury Park that's done so much for the community. Our Volunteer of the Year this year is Mike Dutra, an entrepreneurial business owner, owner of Can Do Graphics. Our Corporate Sponsor of the Year, Express Employment, and our Nonprofit of the Year, Westminster Free Clinic. So we invite everybody to come join us that evening, again, March 1st at the Hyatt. It is going to be emceed by our own Patrick Cassidy, and the music is going to be Beatles-themed. In honor of our outgoing board chair, Chris Shaver, Vice President of Shaver Automotive Group, and the entertainment's going to be produced for us by Patrick and Five Star Theatricals, so it's going to be amazing. Also want to share with you in the little bit of time I have left, the newest issue of Conejo View is on the newsstands and in the mailboxes, digital version on ConejoChamber.org. We are very proud to be your chamber. Thank you so much, and wish you all a very good evening.
Thank you. Our last speaker of the evening, Mr. Chase Rashid. Good evening, Chase. How you doing? Come on up.
Chase Rashid, City of Thousand Oaks. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I hadn't planned to speak in public comment tonight, but I heard some things that were very distressing. When Sandy Hook happened, people brought up conspiracies. People did it with 9/11. With any tragedy, you're gonna find people who wanna bring up conspiracies. And that is wrong. And to do this when people who volunteered after the borderline tragedy, to do that when they were here for a presentation is just wrong. I was at a forum at Westlake High School about a week ago, and I heard one of the mothers of one of the victims speak. You know, I was crying in her rage and her fear and her pain that resonated with everybody in the room. And you know, when you want to make these absurd accusations and conspiracies, please think of the families. There are still people suffering and to attempt to malign the owner of Borderline while he is sitting right here about what the exits were, to do that is just deplorable. This is not who we are in Thousand Oaks. This is not who we are in California, and this is not who we are in America. So please, you have free speech, but please moderate yourself. If you are going to say something that even seems remotely offensive, or if it's going to hurt somebody, take a step back and don't say it. And like I said, you have free speech, but sometimes people don't want to hear it, so moderate yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rashid. Well, is there any follow-up?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just very briefly, we will certainly work to assist in promotion with the upcoming Crop Walk on March the 3rd, and we're very excited about that event. And we're obviously very proud to have two folks affiliated with our city for being recognized for Man and Woman of the Year, in addition to all the other very worthy folks that will be recognized that evening. That's it.
Thank you. Now we move on to item 7, consent calendar. Any questions of the council in regards to the consent calendar, or do we have a motion? Councilmember Billy LaPena.
Move approval of item 7, consent calendar.
Madam Clerk, will you prepare the vote?
The motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Now we'll go to item 9, department reports. We have Leanne Nielsen, the chair for the TO Arts, and take it away. Welcome.
Thank you. Mayor McCoy and City Council members, on behalf of the Thousand Oaks Alliance for the Arts Board of Directors, it is my pleasure to present our report covering TO Arts operations and programming for the last 6 months, ending December 31st, 2018. Tonight, I will provide a brief overview of some of the highlights contained in our report. John Bradley and David Mead were reelected as board directors for 3-year terms running from January 1st, 2019 through December 31st, 2021. In keeping with the MOU between the city and TO Arts, these appointments were ratified by the City Council at your meeting on December 18th. I was reelected board chair, and John Bradley was reelected treasurer for additional 2-year terms running from January 1st, 2019 through December 31st, 2020. Our bylaws allow board officers to serve up to 2 consecutive 2-year terms. Our advisory council is comprised of 22 leaders from all sectors of the local community. In October, the council met to discuss the upcoming 25th anniversary celebration of the Bank of America Performing Arts Center and to discuss our current programming policy for the CAP Presents concert series. Several members of the advisory council volunteered to serve on the planning committee for the anniversary gala dinner and concert. The council also recommended that the board maintain the current focus of CAP Presents programming on popular music, comedy, and family attractions, which has proven to be very successful for TO Arts. On the topic of finance, the board approved the retention of an independent auditor for the fiscal years ending June 30th, 2018 and June 30th, 2019. The firm will submit their audit report for fiscal year 17-18 to our board for approval on Thursday. TO Arts maintains 3 different budgets. The board adopted a fiscal year 2018-19 operating budget of $372,999. In addition, we also maintain separate budgets for CAP Presents programming and the concessions operation for the Kavli Theater and Shear Forum. The combined operations, programming, and concessions budgets for fiscal year 2018-19 total $3.3 million. In September, TO Arts held its annual planning retreat with the board and staff to update the organization's strategic plan through 2020. The updated plan includes a work plan for fiscal year 18-19 and milestones through June 2020. The board tracks the progress of the plan at our monthly board meetings to monitor the implementation and completion of goals and action items. The Angels of the Arts is a TO Arts volunteer guild. They held a planning retreat to discuss strategies to attract new members and to develop a larger variety of fundraising events throughout the year to raise funds to support TO Arts education programs. TO Arts delayed the launch of our annual fund drive until mid-December out of respect for the community fundraising efforts that were underway in support of the victims of the Borderline shooting and the Hill and Woolsey fires. Over $10,000 in contributions were received during the first 2 weeks of this drive. Our Producers Club membership program was launched last spring. It continues to grow, and as of the end of December, more than 40 individuals and businesses have contributed an annual gift of at least $1,000, with many members committing to multi-year commitments. We are currently marketing the naming rights for the artist autograph wall and the history wall displays, which will both be unveiled as part of the 25th anniversary celebration in October 2019. The naming rights for each of the wall displays is available for $250,000 for a term of 10 years. Moving on to our programs, in September, TO Arts presented 2 performances of Deluxe Puppets' production of Alice in Wonderland to over 700 elementary school students as part of our new series of storybook stage productions. In addition, funding was provided to Pacific Festival Ballet to underwrite the tickets for students to attend 2 performances of The Nutcracker in December. TO Arts also launched a new program called Art with Heart, with a goal of providing families with low-cost or free access to art and cultural experiences. 3 events were held over the last 6 months, including Discover the Science Behind the Arts in August, Community Drum Circle in September, and Boo at Kavli in October. Each event was presented in partnership with community nonprofits. Together with the Cultural Affairs Department, the Arts Education Committee moderated a meeting of the Community's Arts Education Focus Group in October, which resulted in the adoption of 5 arts initiatives to be implemented by group members over the next 2 years. TO Arts will join other arts organizations in creating an arts passport that will allow local students to attend performances and cultural activities for free. Through the CAP Presents concert series, TO Arts presented 23 performances between July 1st and December 31st, 2018. Artists included Dave Koz, Brian Wilson, Lily Tomlin, Rodney Crowell, Daughtry, and the national tour of American Idol. These performances attracted 19,653 patrons and grossed $1.3 million in ticket sales revenues. TO Arts is also partnering with the city and a number of artists and organizations to present several special benefit concerts to raise funds for the victims of the Borderline shooting and the Woolsey and Hill fires. The first of these concerts took place on December 22nd and featured comedians Howie Mandel and Jeff Dunham, and REO Speedwagon performed at 2 concerts in early January. Combined, these 3 concerts raised over $500,000 for the victims' funds. The Dr. Raymond M. Olson Performance Grants Program was established to provide local nonprofits with financial assistance to make usage of the theater facilities more accessible. Our board approved the distribution of $173,200 in funding for fiscal year 18-19 for the 3 resident companies and 8 local nonprofit arts organizations. In July, TO Arts created an ad hoc marketing committee comprised of board directors, members of the advisory council, and staff to oversee the creation of a brand identity and communications plan. The marketing consultant we engaged has just completed interviews with stakeholders in the community and is now working on initial recommendations. This project is expected to be completed in June 2019. The Fall CAP Presents programming brochure was distributed to 85,000 households. The resident companies produced an insert promoting their seasons, and TO Arts paid for the cost of the stuffing the insert into the brochure and the mailing. TO Arts also placed full-page ads in the Acorn and the Ventura County Star in September to promote the upcoming seasons of the residents' companies. In the coming months, the board and staff will focus on 5 areas, building upon the success of the development and fundraising activities of the previous fiscal year. The first area is arts education. Our primary goal is to increase the number of arts education performances in the Kavli Theater and the Shear Forum, and to expand the program to take artists into school classrooms. Second, in the area of development, the board and staff will develop a 3-year development plan, establish formal donor benefits for the Founders and Producer Club members, sell the naming rights for the artist autograph wall and history wall displays, and define the fundraising role of the Angels of the Arts Volunteer Guild. Third, we will complete the branding, identity, and communications plan for TO Arts to create broader awareness in the community of TO Arts' mission and programs. Fourth, TO Arts has also set a goal to continue to expand available funding through the Theater Performance Grants program and to better promote the program to local arts organizations that perform in the Kavli Theater and Shear Forum. And finally, our largest project of the year will be working with the city's Cultural Affairs Department to plan the 25th anniversary of the Civic Arts Plaza's Bank of America Performing Arts Center. The celebration will take place in early October 2019. Activities will include a gala dinner and concert, a special performance by the residence companies, and a community open house and lawn party. TO Arts will also unveil the artist autograph wall and the history wall displays in the Kavli Theater lobby during the anniversary celebration. On behalf of the TO Arts board and staff and the millions of patrons whose lives have been enriched by attending performances at the Bank of America Performing Arts Center, I thank you for your continued support of our efforts and activities. This completes our report. Our Executive Director, Barry McComb, and Finance Director, Jamie Boscarino, and I are available to answer any questions that you may have.
Leanne, thank you for a wonderful presentation and all you've been doing. That's just remarkable.
Thank you.
I'm going to clap for that. That's just all there is to it. Any questions from the council for Barry? Yeah, go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, I don't have a question. I'd like to compliment you. When I read this report, I don't think I've ever read a more thorough report about activity. I just had no idea that so much is being done here for the arts.
Great.
And you filled in you already answered some questions I had about who are the angels, et cetera, et cetera. I really appreciate your Art with Heart program, and I think that's just wonderful. And I have no questions, but I'm just like to say that I'm just very favorably impressed with all you're doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have a very strong board and a terrific staff that supports us, so thank you.
Councilmember Bill de la Peña?
Thank you, Mayor McCoy. Well, first of all, thank you for the thorough presentation. I am absolutely tickled that the arts are taking off in the city of Thousand Oaks, and this will be a fabulous year for the arts, and it's absolutely wonderful. I do have a question that is directed at our theaters director, Mr. McComb, and that is the 85,000 households. Do many of the households or the brochures, are they mailed outside of the city of Thousand Oaks?
Yes, we've over the years we've kind of shrunk our distribution radius a little bit. First and foremost, they hit all the households within Thousand Oaks. Then we purchase lists for key zip codes that we know we draw a lot of patrons from. And then in addition, they're available for distribution at some locations around town as well as at theater performances.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Adam.
Thank you, Mayor. You mentioned those brochures. The nice thing about those brochures is they go to 85,000 people, but they also advertise for our resident companies, California Dance, New West Symphony, and Five Star Theatrical. So it's a good support for our community companies. And I'm glad to see that a year's work of merging the Alliance and the Foundation is really paying off, especially with you at the helm. Thank you, Leanne. When we combined the two organizations, a new board was instituted, of course, but we still wanted to get participation from so many people that wanted to, continue to engage with the arts. So you have the advisory council, which I think is a great idea. How many people are on that?
22?
The Advisory Council is currently 22 members.
22.
We also, most of our committees of the board are ad hoc committees, which also allow us to have community participation on those committee opportunities as well. So
Yeah, I
the
think
number
that's
of
great.
members of the community is actually much larger than the 22 members of the Advisory Council.
Yeah, people want to participate, and to be able to go beyond just the board and then to give that feedback to the board, I think is really essential. I think that's great. We're working on the 25th anniversary in October. And do we have well, I don't know if we can announce this or not, but do we have a headliner for that yet, or we're still working on that?
We're working on that.
We're working on that. Well, okay. Well, there's ain't no mountain high enough that I'm sure you'll be able to work that out, Barry. So, love it. Anyway, thank you, Leanne. Great report. I'm so glad to see the arts are thriving in the city, and thanks to TO Arts, they're going to continue to do so. Thank you.
I understand it was going to be a Beatlemania and you were going to be playing Paul. Is that right, Al? That's not funny. Okay. Mr. Powers.
Thanks so much, Mayor McCoy. I just wanted to take a quick opportunity to acknowledge Dr. Nielsen and Barry McComb, who serves as the executive director in addition to his regular day job of being cultural affairs director here. Having been at the table through negotiations with the Alliance for the Arts and creating this merger, and Dr. Nielsen, in addition to her day job being provost at CLU, has dedicated a tremendous amount of time to helping this brand new organization come forward and really turn into the strongest arts nonprofit in Ventura County. And I'm so proud of the success we've had so far. I know Councilmember Adam, who was there through what were sometimes lengthy discussions in the merger, we just couldn't be more proud and appreciative of your leadership in sort of steering the entity forward.
Thank you.
I wholeheartedly agree. Do we have a motion? Councilmember Adam.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'll move to accept the TO Arts report.
Madam Clerk, do we need to vote on that? Yep. Let's go. That's it.
The motion carries 5-0.
Thank you very much. Item 9B, landscaping upgrades. And we've got Nader Haydari, Engineering Division Manager. No? Nader. Did I say Nader? Nader. Forgive me.
You're good. Good evening, Mayor McCoy and the members of the council.
You got my name right, and I got yours wrong.
My name is Nader Haydari, Engineering Manager for the city's Capital Projects Division. I'm here tonight to give a department report on the award of construction contract for the landscape upgrades Forestry Master Plan Demonstration Sites project. Just some quick background. The Forestry Master Plan is used as a guide for selecting the appropriate plant and tree palette for the medians and parkways throughout the city. The Forestry Master Plan was updated and adopted by the City Council in April 2017. The last one had been done in 1989. The update includes the elimination of turf and spray sprinklers within the city and instead replacing them with smart irrigation and California-friendly, drought-tolerant landscaping that is functional and attractive. The final master plan document was developed using feedback from city staff as well as extensive public outreach throughout the city and all regions of the city. So the Forestry Master Plan broke the city down into 5 regions based on the character of the streetscape plantings as well as kind of the overall neighborhoods within the city. And so that's shown on the screen right now, these 5 regions. One prominent median site in each of the landscape regions was selected to serve as the demonstration site for this new landscaping, California-friendly landscaping that was outlined in the Forestry Master Plan. So we're just going to walk through them real briefly. This is demonstration site number 1. This is starting from west to east. This is in Dos Vientos. It's along Lynn Road between Villa Las Brisas and Villa Goleta. It's about 590 feet in length. On the left is the current median as it currently exists, and on the right-hand side is the rendering of the proposed demonstration site. The theme for this region is California Native Garden. Demonstration site number 2 is the Newbury Park region. This median is on Reno Road, just south of Borchard. It's approximately 500 foot in length, and again, the before and after pictures are depicted. The theme for this region is a colorful garden. Again, all of these selections were done based on community input. Demonstration site number 3, Thousand Oaks West. It's on Lynn Road, just north of Hillcrest Drive, one of the most traveled intersections in the city. This one's a little over 1,000 feet in length, this block. And here is the renderings. The landscaping theme for this region is Adaptive Arroyo. And then the 4th one, Thousand Oaks East. The median on Sunset Hills Boulevard was selected between Herbs Road and the 23 freeway. This one is about 700 foot in length. The theme here is the flowering highlights, and here are the renderings. And then our last demonstration site is the North Ranch Westlake area. It's on Lindero Canyon Road between Beaufield and Rockfield. This block is even a little bit larger. It's about 1,400 feet. And here's the images. This is a California Meadows is the name for this particular area. So the project was authorized for bid by the City Council in September 2018, and staff obtained a total of 9 bids. Bids were opened on December 12th, and the bids range from $1.1 million to $2.5 million. These are good bids. We had a few of them here just below our engineer's estimate of $1.3 million. The apparent successful low bidder is United Irrigation out of Carlsbad with a bid amount of $1.1 million. The project's total cost, including design and construction, is under $1.5 million. It's funded by a combination of landscape district and general fund based on the location of the project, of each of the sites, as depicted on this slide. And the overall project costs are here broken down between design and construction. Staff is recommending that council authorize the expenditure of the $1.2 million for construction of the project tonight. The construction schedule, if the project is approved, would start next month in March and last 90 days for the base construction, and then it's followed by a 4-month landscape establishment period that the contractor is obligated to make sure that all the plants survive. And that would run through October. We've established a dedicated city website for the public outreach on the project to continue forward. It's been in place for some time now and it will continue to be updated. It's toaks.org/forestry, where residents can stay informed on the latest progress. In addition, we've installed these project signs in each of the 5 locations in the medians, and they will remain there for the course of the project. The recommendations are in the staff report. Staff is available to answer any questions the council may have. With me tonight is City Engineer Cliff Finley and Landscape Maintenance Supervisor Garrett Crawford. Again, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Nader. Well, council, you have any questions for the panel? Councilmember Adam.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I'm sure these are going to really beautify those medians. Pardon me. I like the 5 different concepts to give the public, some choices. And now, certainly, our general fund's not going to allow us to do all the medians throughout the city. So if the public sees a median they like and they happen to be in a landscape assessment district already, that would enable them if the majority approves of it, to have a median similar to the one they would pick, correct?
Correct.
But if you're not in a landscape assessment district, then what happens? And you want a median like that.
So we will be offering a landscape district opportunity for those neighborhoods that want to improve their medians. There's a process to go through. You actually have to vote. 50% of the community or the impacted neighbors get to vote on that, and if more than half want to be assessed, then we would be able to move forward with these projects. Otherwise, those projects will have to compete with other general fund dollars. And again, our medians are, as the community is, they have aged and they're tired, and there has never been money set aside, obviously, to replace those medians. So we will need a sustainable funding source in the future to do these projects.
And our medians are very high profile too. They really demonstrate the city's commitment to beautification.
They are, and these examples will show what they could be for the next 20 years.
Yeah.
So we're excited
So
about that.
based on the community input that you got, do you see that as feasible, that the public will consent to do some assessment districts to have these medians installed?
There's been an awful lot of interest in our outreach.
Okay.
But we have not tested any districts specifically and talked about a vote at this point in time. Once these get constructed, we will come forward with some additional opportunities, some projects that we think we can move forward with, estimate the cost, and talk about maybe forming some additional districts or adding to some existing districts.
Yeah, I think the key will constructing them first so people can see them, of course, and then go from there. Thanks, Cliff.
Yeah.
Councilmember Bill de la Peña?
I'm ready to make a motion.
Well, we got a couple more speakers.
Oh, okay.
You want
Oh, we do have speakers?
well, no, I mean, the
Oh,
council
okay, that's
members
fine.
want to,
Then I'll wait.
they want to chat a little bit. Councilmember Engler?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick question. On occasion, the bids that were chosen for other projects that we've had were not the low bid. In this case, United was substantially lower than some of the other bids that came in. Can you explain in this particular case why United was the winning bid as a low bidder?
Yes, in this particular case, this is a construction contract, and we are bound by state law to select the low bidder. It's a public bidding process. The plans are presented to everybody. They get 30 days to bid on the project, and we are required to select the lowest bidder. And some of the other projects you're speaking of, those were professional services or consulting agreements. Those follow a different process. They are qualifications-based selection. You select a consultant based on the qualifications, and then you negotiate a scope with them based on their understanding of the project and the work. So it's not truly a bid. It's really more of a proposal or a cost associated with a level of effort is what we call it.
Thanks for that answer. And Councilmember Jones?
Yeah, I appreciate, to carry on what Councilman Engler said, I appreciate your putting in all the process that you went through in the bids and the what you went through to make your final decision. Maybe I missed it, but are any of these drought-tolerant plants that are in the 5 presentation areas?
Good evening, Councilmember Ed Jones. Yes, all of the medians incorporate drought tolerant and where we can, native vegetation.
Thank you.
We have a motion from Councilmember Bill de la Peña, so you want to prepare the vote? Yep, she made one. I heard her. Didn't she make a motion?
In a way, yes.
I'll do it again then.
I'll do it. I'll move to approve staff recommendation.
Officially done. Now let's vote.
Did the vote come up? The motion carries 5-0.
Nodder, please forgive me for your name, but I won't mess this up. Patrick Heher is going to be sharing with us, Assistant City Attorney, on the item 9C, Cannabis Regulations Operation Update. Take it away, Patrick.
Thank you, Mayor McCoy and council members. Yep. Make sure we're here. Nope. Huh? Okay, so, excuse me, we're having a little technical difficulty here, but, sorry?
Just start talking. It'll work.
Okay. All right, we're here to, I am joined here with Melissa Hurtado, our Revenue Operations Manager, and Mina Leyva, our Legislative Affairs Manager. And we are here tonight to talk about an update on cannabis regulations and the current status of the city's cannabis program. We thought it would be important to review the background of how we arrived at the state's current status on cannabis and how the City Council has been examining and responding on the cannabis topic since 2015. And in 2015, the state adopted the Medical Marijuana Regulation and Safety Act, or MRSA. And MRSA provided the state a regulatory framework for commercial cannabis, but only for medicinal purposes. In response to MRSA, in 2016, City Council adopted an ordinance prohibiting all commercial medical cannabis activity and personal cultivation. Later that year, Proposition 64, the California Marijuana Legalization Initiative, was on the November 8, 2016 ballot. As an initiated state statute, supporters refer to the initiative as the Adult Use of Marijuana Act, or AMA. Although Proposition 64 expressly protected the ability of local governments to regulate or ban any or all commercial cannabis activities, including deliveries, at a person's home, and allowed a person to grow up to 6 plants if it was permitted that they could do so. So what happens with AMA is that we had to allow them to grow 6 plants in their home or an enclosed room or building that was secured, but we could prohibit any other type of use. So in March of 2017, the state made another change, and they adopted the Medicinal and Adult Use Cannabis Regulation and Safety Act, which repealed MRSA and AMA. And then after nearly a year of research and public engagement, which included a public forum and citywide survey, it became clear that the community showed a willingness to allow one medicinal cannabis facility in the city for the local access, and also possibly one testing laboratory. There was not much support for any other type of cannabis operations. So in response, the city adopted an ordinance in November 2017 to allow one medical cannabis retailer and one cannabis testing laboratory in the city with certain restrictions. And then in December of 2017, the application and selection process was then approved of how we were going to select these two possible operators. So then we get to July 10th of 2018. So after an extensive vetting process completed with the assistance of consultants from HDL, staff brought recommendations to City Council for consideration of 3 candidates for the operation of one medical cannabis dispensary. 2 candidates appeared at the selection meeting, and City Council decided on Legendary Organics. And factors in the evaluation process for each candidate included that the facility be located in the M1 zone, that the renderings of the type of facility that would be built were appropriate, and that the community benefits will be provided. However, the primary factor The primary factor articulated during the selection process and ultimately the selection of Legendary Organics was the location of the facility at 2712 Conejo Center Drive. After that selection, council instructed the city manager's office and city attorney's office to negotiate an agreement within a short time frame with Legendary. If the two parties were unable to reach an agreement, council further directed staff to begin negotiations with the second candidate selected, which was Leaf Dispensary. An operations agreement was executed timely with Legendary Organics on August 27th, 2018. So what is the current status of the operator? After the selection in September 14th, 2018, the city regulatory permit was issued to Legendary Organics. It expires on December 31st, 2019. On October 11th, 2018, so basically a month after they got their permit, Legendary Organics submitted a plan to the city planning department for review. A few days later, the city provided comments on those plans and remitted them back to Legendary Organics. Legendary Organics has not submitted revised plans to date. We have seen a published report that they did plan to operate and open in 90 to 120 days.
Good evening, council members and mayor. In an effort to provide you with some background on the state regulatory structure, after Prop 64 was passed, the state of California established a regulatory oversight of cannabis by establishing the Bureau of Cannabis Control, creating opportunities in the California Department of Health and California Department of Food and Agriculture for oversight. The Bureau of Cannabis Control specifically is responsible for regulating commercial cannabis licenses for retailers, distributors, micro businesses, testing laboratories, and temporary cannabis events. On December 7th, 2017, the initial emergency regulations became effective for these agencies. It is important to note that the emergency regulation for the Bureau of Cannabis Control did not contain language for statewide delivery. On July 13, 2018, the state's cannabis licensing authorities published a notice of proposed rulemaking to transition emergency policies toward a more permanent regulatory structure. One key regulatory change was the inclusion of universal or statewide deliveries by the Bureau of Cannabis Control, which again was not part of Prop 64. What this means is that any state licensed retailer may deliver anywhere within the state of California, whether a city bans it or not. Prop 64, passed by voters in November 2016, expressly protected the ability of local governments to regulate all cannabis business activities, including deliveries. The proposed rulemaking is an arbitrary expansion of the ballot measure. The Bureau of Cannabis Control had a 45-day comment period and held 3 hearings statewide. The public had a right to submit public comments in writing or attend one of the regional hearings. The city testified at the hearing held on August 14th in downtown Los Angeles and submitted an opposition letter on the preemption of deliveries. The League of California Cities also testified in person their opposition at all 3 hearings. Now, even after the opposition by municipalities, the state, across the state, and the League of California Cities, on October 2018, the Bureau of Cannabis Control released its final regulations with yet no change to universal deliveries, which again preempts local control. The city sent another letter of opposition during their limited, now 15-day comment period. Unfortunately, on January 16, 2019, after the Office of Administrative Law reviewed the regulations, they approved them and made them effective immediately. As part of the new adopted language, a delivery employee may only deliver cannabis goods to a physical address in California. A delivery employee shall not leave the state of California while possessing cannabis goods. As part of some of the provisions, as you know, significantly, retailers are allowed to deliver both medicinal and now recreational marijuana. Thus, cities that banned all cannabis activities are now subject to deliveries of all cannabis products. Some of the provisions include deliveries must be at a specific distance from schools, youth centers, daycare centers to provide exposure to children. Delivery cars must be unmarked, and deliveries must be ordered via an online platform. Deliveries must be made by licensed retailers. Delivery vehicles may leave for delivery with no more than $5,000 worth of cannabis product. Product must be in a locked, fully enclosed container or box. Licensed business must have a tracking device on delivery vehicles and must be able to provide reports on deliveries made to the Bureau of Cannabis Control. An inventory ledger and delivery log must be maintained. Patrick Keher will discuss the implications of these aforementioned provisions to the operator. As far as possible legal challenges and legislation, there are no lawsuits filed against the Bureau of Cannabis Control that the city is aware of at this time. In discussions with both the League of California Cities and the California Chiefs, which is the state organization of police departments, there is no current interest in pursuing a lawsuit. In review of new legislation introduced by the California State Legislature, there are currently no bills seeking amendments to the Bureau of Cannabis Control's regulations.
All right, so how do these regulations that the state is now pushing forward impact our operator? The state's bureau decision certainly impacts all cities and local agencies that had banned deliveries, but cities still have the authority to ban all other cannabis operations, such as cultivation, manufacturing, distribution, and retail shops. But despite the process that we went through, the state has effectively impacted our plans by allowing deliveries. Now, does this affect Legendary Organics? Well, certainly, in fairness to them, they were awarded the sole medical dispensary in our city. And so their pro forma is going to indicate that there are no other types of medical facilities in our city. So the state action can certainly impact it and affect how they were going to operate and frankly, their financial impact. But again, with this, certainly Legendary, is, just like any other operator that has been approved in our city, is free to open and operate their commercial medical cannabis at the location that was approved. The Bureau's decision, however, probably impacts their sales predictions before the regulation was approved, just as it would have done to any other facility that was open in a location that had banned deliveries in their jurisdiction. So we have that operations agreement. In our opinion, opening the operations agreement is not necessary or advised at this time. These new regulations require us to allow deliveries. Unless a court determines that the Bureau's arbitrary decision was unlawful or beyond their authority, we would contend that the Legendary would also have a right to conduct deliveries.
Okay, so I'm going to give you a little information on what regulations the city currently has in place and provide some options to you. So first, in November of last year, Thousand Oaks voters overwhelmingly passed a cannabis business tax. Although the city has approved very limited cannabis activity in the city, the approved tax encompasses all facets of the cannabis industry, thus allowing the taxation should the need arise. Under the cannabis tax ordinance, the business tax for retail deliveries is 4% of gross receipts. So City Council essentially has two options to consider on how to regulate the deliveries. The first is to take no action. The city's cannabis tax ordinance requires all businesses to obtain a business tax certificate, and those cannabis businesses would be required to pay the cannabis business tax. However, the city will have no authority to audit these businesses to ensure that they are paying the full amount owed. The second option is to require both a business tax certificate and a regulatory permit. The regulatory permit would provide the city the ability to audit the businesses for verification of amounts owed, and would also allow the city to require proof of background checks on those drivers that would be operating in the city. So after carefully reviewing the regulations and several discussions with HDL Companies, who is the city's cannabis consultant, staff concurs that the best course of action would be to require a regulatory permit from the dispensaries delivering in the city, in addition to the business tax certificate. Should City Council choose to pursue the regulatory permit, staff may be directed to return with a proposed amendment to the cannabis regulatory ordinance. So although the city has the authority to enforce, regulate, and monitor cannabis activity within its jurisdiction, with deliveries coming from outside communities and in unmarked cars, we want to be clear that enforcement would be very difficult. So city staff is prepared to send notices to all dispensaries in the region, including Los Angeles and Santa Barbara counties, to notify them of the city's requirements for deliveries. The contents and the timing of these notifications will be dependent on the desired approach by City Council. Okay, and switching gears a little here. Last year, when the applications were being accepted for a dispensary and testing laboratory, we did not have a successful candidate for the testing laboratory. Since that time, a number of interested parties have contacted the city in hopes for applying for this permit. Should City Council desire to open this application process, staff may be directed to return and request formal authorization. So obviously the state's regulatory change to allow deliveries is a significant change to the city's cannabis regulatory framework. But since the purpose of this presentation was to simply provide you with the current status of the cannabis program, there are no action items for consideration tonight. However, City Council does have options to consider on this topic. So the first, you can make no changes at all. Leave the city's rules and regulations as they stand. Second, you can instruct us, staff, to provide analysis and options at a future council meeting regarding one or both of the following topics. To come back with a municipal code amendment to address cannabis deliveries, and two, to instruct staff to adopt procedural options regarding the establishment of a cannabis testing laboratory in Thousand Oaks. And third, you can request staff to return to City Council after summer recess to provide an update on cannabis, as this will provide time to determine the impacts of deliveries on the city and the new progress from our operator. And staff is available for questions.
Thank you very much. We've got a few questions from council, and then we'll go to public comments. Councilmember Adam.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a little quick rewind here. When we first heard the issue of cannabis in the city of Thousand Oaks, we had a number of people come down to the podium and express to us that they had serious medical conditions and that cannabis helped alleviate those conditions. And I think that really struck a chord with the members of the council, and that's why we approved the medicinal marijuana facility, the first of its kind. And the hardship for these folks was that they would live in Thousand Oaks and they might have to drive to Woodland Hills or beyond to get the cannabis necessary for their relief. That's all changed now. The ground is completely shifted. The state of California said, and even though we did not approve deliveries on the advice of our police chief, and we did not approve recreational marijuana either, the state of California has decided that they want access of cannabis to as many people as need it, recreational or medicinal, and deliveries are now legal everywhere. So that has changed things to a certain degree here in the city. My question, and I think you put it up there on the map, it looked to me like there are a lot of cannabis facilities in the immediate area. Do you have any estimate of how many that may be?
Yeah, we actually went and checked the Bureau of Cannabis Control, and between the retail storefronts, non-retail storefronts, and micro businesses, all which are allowed to deliver, there are 330 businesses within the 3 counties, mostly in Los Angeles County.
Is that right? And would you say the majority of them are capable of delivery, or they are delivering, or?
I can't say that they are delivering. Are they capable? Absolutely. And some of them are at some distance in Los Angeles County that might not be optimal for them to deliver to Thousand Oaks. However, there are a lot just in the San Fernando Valley area that would, I'm sure, be happy to deliver to Thousand Oaks.
That would deliver to our city.
It is also important to note that when we were discussing this and debating this with the various representatives from the state, there were several Los Angeles operators who were going through the process to get their brick and mortar location, who are also very upset about this possible opening that was going to allow deliveries. And their argument, of course, was they went through this whole process with Los Angeles to obtain the permit, to obtain the license, to obtain the location. All those factors went into play. And then for this one decision to come in very shortly after this whole thing was adopted in the first place, within a year, was upsetting to them as well. So we can't tell you how many. Obviously, we think there are going to be a number of them that we would be concerned about coming into our city.
Well, I would say the likelihood of this, state measure being overturned is very small. I think this is going to be the new normal. Normal, N-O-R-M-L. How about that? Anyway, so getting to my point, it has changed things, and that initial concern that folks that needed cannabis for medical reasons, and the fact that they'd have to drive down, so many miles to get it, seemingly could be alleviated with this whole delivery business. Now, I'm not saying we don't need a medicinal cannabis facility here in Thousand Oaks. In fact, we have one that could open, and the permit is all the way good till December 31st of 2019. But I would say that because of the delivery business that we're going to see in this city, I do think we need to amend some things about how we deal with that. I mean, the public voted overwhelmingly to tax this business. So it seems to me we have to respond, and I think you listed a regulatory permit as one way, and the business license is another. I think it's important that we move ahead with that. Mainly, for one reason, just to respond to the public and the vote that they gave us. So, well, I guess I'm getting more into the comment side now, but it seems to me that, and that last recommendation, maybe we have staff monitor this delivery business, see how it's going, see how the taxing side of it goes, and gets back to us around mid-year and gives us a report as to how that's working.
Good. Next will be Councilmember Bill De La Peña.
Thank you, Mayor McCoy. I have a couple of questions. You mentioned that enforcement will be very difficult. So if we put all of these 330 businesses on notice to pay tax, how are we going to know how much they're delivering to Thousand Oaks?
Okay.
If they do apply for a regulatory permit, we can put conditions on that permit to require them to allow our auditors, or HDL companies can provide audits, or we can hire another audit firm to audit the business, and it would provide them access to their point of sale system so that they can actually see the deliveries made to Thousand Oaks and ensure that the proper tax is being submitted to the city.
How often would we audit?
It would probably be once a year, once every 2 years. The tax would be remitted quarterly. So if we did find something that was not maybe within our expectations, we could do, an audit off season, if you will, but it would likely be annually or biannually.
My second question is, we have someone with a license who has not used it yet, so to speak, and businesses are already delivering to the city of Thousand Oaks. We would need to issue another license to someone else if that other someone else wants to do deliveries from the city of Thousand Oaks.
As it stands right now, any business licensed retailer from the state that comes into the city should be applying for a business tax certificate and should be paying a 4% gross receipts tax.
But go ahead.
I think what you're asking is delivery from the city of Thousand Oaks, not into the city.
A distribution center from the city of Thousand Oaks.
Yes, you're correct. That would require another operator to apply to the city for that to occur.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
And so if we just left things as they are currently, which is one of the recommendations, we could instruct, as you say, we could instruct you to provide an analysis after 1 year. But in the meantime, we would establish a procedure in which we would require the regulatory permit and the business certificate.
Well, actually, we were hoping to come back to you sooner than 1 year, as soon as possible, actually, to get your direction to bring back an amended ordinance to implement the permit procedures.
Right. If I may, if you wanted to do a regulatory permit to have that, we would want to amend our ordinance to allow that specific thing. We already have the tax, but we want to have that regulatory permit, which gives us some more authority to have them produce information for us, their employee list, things of that nature.
And just for clarification, to make sure everyone understands the differences between a business tax license and a regulatory permit is the business tax license is just it's a monetary license that's issued to any business that does business in the city. There's no regulatory framework that's established for the city to monitor anything. If the city council is inclined or wants to monitor those specific businesses, we've done it for other businesses, then we would have to establish a regulatory scheme.
And you would want us to give you direction to do that as soon as possible? Or come back with a recommendation as soon as possible?
So if the inclination from the council is to, that you would prefer a regulatory scheme, then tonight you should be directing staff to come back to the city council with an analysis of what that scheme would look like, and for you to direct staff to actually move forward with a municipal code amendment.
And at that time, could we also make a recommendation or to open up the process for the testing center again, because we have had interest in that lately?
Yes, tonight you can ask us to bring that back as well.
Thank you.
Councilmember Jones.
Yeah, I want you to explain a little bit about how the delivery system works. Do people arrange in advance?
Yes, and that's a great question. It must be arranged in advance. So under the new regulation, assuming it still stands, for deliveries, a company must have their deliverer come, and they can have up to $5,000 worth of product and up to, I think, $3,000 worth of sales at the time, but those have to be already ordered. And then they're allowed to stay within the jurisdiction for 1/2 hour. And if they get any new orders with that same product, they're allowed to deliver at that point. Beyond that 1/2 hour, they're supposed to return back to the retail office, wherever that is, whether it's in Los Angeles or Santa Barbara, and bring their product back.
Couldn't drive down the street like a good humor man, sort of thing.
Not supposed to. Not with the bells ringing either.
Yeah, thank you.
Councilmember Engler.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have a lot of concerns about the delivery aspect of this and the monitoring of that delivery. I think you mentioned earlier in the discussion that there may be deliveries going on right now, but we have no idea whether they're going on. Is that correct?
That would be correct.
Is there other cities that are wrestling with this as well, who are coming up with ways to monitor this activity so that perhaps we would have a better control or better knowledge of what is being delivered and where?
Well, frankly, the easiest way that we could have done it is if we had banned deliveries and the state allowed us to continue to ban deliveries, we would know that any deliveries that were being done in our city would be in violation of our code. but we don't have that with this new regulation at this point. So that is a struggle that we're going to have because police are going to need probable cause, obviously, to stop somebody. Now, in these new regulations, they did give, in addition to the Bureau, they did give the police authority to ask a delivery person for their manifests, for their documentation, for their orders, and stuff of that nature. Obviously, we won't get into whether or not there's good cause, but you would obviously need to have some reason to be stopping that person to ask them for that information. And that's probably how we would monitor it at this stage. It's going to be a challenge. It certainly is going to be a challenge, and that's why we made a comment that it's going to be difficult for it, not just our city, for every city across the state, especially those that had banned deliveries up until this point.
And if I might add to that, just based on City Attorney Noonan's comment, that's why from a staff perspective, getting some direction at some point to update our municipal code to address deliveries provides more mechanisms by which we can collaborate with the police department to ensure that whatever controls we can provide, we can.
Thank you. I think, we definitely have to address our ordinance to update it to this new state way of doing things. I do have feelings for our applicant who is attempting to build his business and building it as he's flying the plane. So it's a difficult situation both for the applicants and also for the city. Is it possible to come up as quickly as possible with the recommendations from staff as far as what types of amendments to the ordinances we need?
Yeah, we can bring it back to probably I'm looking at the city manager for a possible date.
Sure. I just want to clarify the question really quick. I think Councilmember Igor's question is, we have someone that's operating under license now, has not opened doors. Unclear when that is going to happen, but to the extent that they're able to provide deliveries as well out of that. So there's two pieces to that. One dealing with the external factors, one dealing with our applicant. I think that's what you're asking.
Okay,
Is that
yes.
correct?
So with respect to the municipal code, we can put that on the agenda, pretty quickly and come back with some recommendations on some changes to the municipal code amendment. With respect to the operator of the medicinal cannabis facility, there's nothing that prevents them from, again, opening their doors and conducting deliveries. There's nothing that prevents them from doing that. They have a valid permit that is in exist that will not expire until the end of the year. So at this point, it's up to them whether or not they want to open their doors.
Ms. Noonan, in relation to if the council desires to move forward with a regulatory permit, business tax certificate, would it behoove those that would desire to set up a brick and mortar in our city to apply for that, even though they may not have won the contract, to be ready when or if that?
If I understand your question, you're asking for companies that were not awarded the permit? So it's my understanding, and I'm looking at the Assistant City Attorney to confirm this, my understanding that only those that have a valid or a bona fide retail establishment, only those businesses are allowed to conduct deliveries. Right now in the city of Thousand Oaks, there's only one establishment that has that, although they've not opened their doors. If there was a desire for another business to open up shop, we would have to have council start the whole process all over again.
And my recommendation, frankly, would be to stay the course at this time.
Yeah.
And frankly, we have one operator. Yes, it hasn't opened yet, but I think there's a lot of reasons, and we can go through them if you want to hear them. But there are a lot of reasons why we should stay the course at this point, and frankly, just wait and see. There's a lot of balls up there. We have, again, possible litigation or challenges to this change. We haven't seen the landscape of the one operator and how that impacts our city, and we don't know. If we have another operator in our city, we don't know the positive or negative impacts that might happen with another location. So there are a lot of reasons why I would recommend that we just stay where we are at this point with the recommendations that we have before you tonight.
At the council meeting where council considered the applications, council directed, there was discussion over a second permit being issued. And at that time, council decided to wait until the permittee was had established their business for a year so that staff could monitor, first of all, whether there's any impacts from a brick and mortar store in the city, and second of all, whether it's necessary to have another brick and mortar store within the city. So staff would recommend that we continue along that path so that we can fully evaluate it, particularly because at this point, since deliveries are available within the city, the council's primary concern of access is being met.
Councilmember Adam, and then after that, Councilmember Jones.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one quick question. We did pick Legendary, and I think the primary reason was the location that they offered. We thought that was good. It just occurred to me, though, as far as this delivery business, if and when Legendary opens, are they obligated by law to offer delivery?
Absolutely not. They're available right now to open up their store, which is what the plan was, to have a medical dispensary where it's appointment only, certain times of the period of the day to be operating, no signage of that kind of nature, very limited, and that was on purpose with all the vetting that we went through, as you all are aware. And so certainly they can do that, and there might be, frankly, a need for that and a purpose. I won't speak for them on that issue because we certainly think and realistically that this delivery system now that can be allowed certainly would impact any brick and mortar location with the ability for them to order and have it delivered at their home. And it must be at a physical residence and not on public property.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to be clear. There's no state law that obligates Legendary to offer delivery. However, in the realm of business, they might have to do that to stay competitive. But
right, and that's why when we brought these numbers of facilities that are located in Los Angeles and Santa Barbara, this big number, hundreds of them, we're not sure how many of them would offer delivery. That's obviously another cost, more employees. There's another procedure they have to follow. They're regulated by the Bureau for that process. Things of that nature.
So theoretically, Legendary could open under the guidelines that we prescribed and choose delivery later down the road if they chose to. All right, that's good clarification. Thank you.
Excuse me just a moment, Councilmember Jones. I just wanted to add, it's concerning to me that the state would inundate us with deliveries, usurp our authority as a local council. And here we have an opportunity to have a brick and mortar that, if we're going to be inundated with our citizenry having access, to have a local brick and mortar that can describe the effects of the medication, someone to counsel them, someone they can communicate with, as opposed to somebody just dropping off, cannabis. I sure wish these folks would get a move on and get this brick and mortar done, quite honestly. Because the state is jumping on it, and I just don't want adverse concerns for our citizenry. Councilmember Jones?
Yeah, it sounds like the state, I appreciate all the hard work you went through to approve a place, and I'm sure you did it after getting a lot of information and making a good decision. Looks like that's been obviated perhaps by the state. I'd like to try to understand what is the difference in quality, and I mean, you're talking about a testing laboratory that wasn't approved, but you did approve a dispensary. Is there a difference in the quality and the aptitude of the product to cure whatever you're going to cure with medical marijuana? Is there a difference between the medical marijuana and the recreational marijuana? I mean, the quality of the product?
Well, I'm certainly not an expert on that. I think there's certain impacts that you might have, physical disabilities that you might have, that a person who's knowledgeable in the cannabis product would be able to steer a patient possibly, or a person, to a certain type or strain of cannabis to help a specific type of ailment, for lack of a better term. Going back to your comment about the testing laboratory, just to be clear for you, we, or the council, approved that we could have one testing laboratory in our city, but when we did the application process, We didn't actually have a viable candidate for that at that time. So there was no discussion about approving a testing laboratory in our city. And a testing laboratory is strictly just that. They can't have any other type of license because their goal is to test all the different cannabis for all the types of uses, whether it's through distribution, through the retail shops. Their job is to test to make sure that it's a certain type of quality and does not have contaminants in it.
Well, I'm still confused. Is the testing necessary for all cannabis, whether it be recreational or medical?
In this state, it is required that cannabis from any retail shop be tested, yes. There are concerns about cannabis having pesticides, for example, is probably one of the biggest ones. And the amount and the grade of CBD and THC that it's in each strain.
Well, since we don't have a testing laboratory, I presume then that if the brick and mortar establishment opened up, they'd have to get testing somewhere else, or would they do it on site?
No, they cannot do it on site. It has to be an independent laboratory that tests it, and so they would have to go to the nearest one or make arrangements for whatever testing laboratory they want to send their product to.
And the recreational would have to be tested also.
That is correct.
So I presume there's a testing lab somewhere.
There are several testing labs, yes.
Okay.
And just to qualify on top of that, Councilmember Jones, in this process, the state required cities to affirmatively take action on a whole host of things, commercial cultivation being one of those, testing facilities being another one. The council elected to initiate a process for testing facility. We only received one applicant that was interested, and that applicant also had applied for a dispensary license, and you obviously can't have both. They elected to move forward with the testing, with the dispensary license, and so we had no applicants. And so when council made the decision, our discussion was we would bring that back at some later stage when there was potentially interest in having that type of business in the community. And we have received a few phone calls from potential businesses, and that's why that is on number 2B in your recommendation list. If you should so direct us, we can come back with that. But that is simply just to clarify for everyone, that's simply a business that takes a fractional amount of product and tests that product. It's really no different than a lot of other types of laboratories.
How do they get reimbursed? How do they, how do they charge for the testing? Is that it?
That's correct. They charge.
So
their clients are the dispensaries and the growers, and they are required by state law to be tested. And so they have a contractual relationship, and a transaction occurs between those locations and the testing facility.
If there are people in Thousand Oaks that are definitely in need of medical marijuana, and we don't have the brick and mortar place open yet, I wonder if they would get the same quality if they just phoned one of these drive-by delivery people. Would that suffice their medical needs, do you think, if they got... I still don't know if there's any difference in the quality and the performance of recreational marijuana versus medical. I don't understand that.
Councilmember Jones, maybe I can help you. So under the state regulations, they're highly regulated. Every single ounce of marijuana that is sold by either a recreational retail facility or a medical retail facility has to undergo testing for quality assurance. It's highly regulated. So the question before us is not whether or not there's a difference between medical or recreational. It all goes through a testing process, whether that testing facility is located in the city of Thousand Oaks or it's located in another city. It's all regulated that way. Does that help?
I just presume if there are people in Thousand Oaks who have been prescribed, I presume if you get medical, you have a doctor's prescription. Is that correct?
It is actually a recommendation. It's not a prescription.
You get a recommendation. Right.
Well, in the absence of such a place here, I'm just wondering if they would satisfy their needs by just getting the delivery of the recreation. I'm probably learning more about marijuana than I ever wanted to know, but
you and me both. Yeah. So if there's a lot of cities, Councilmember Jones, that don't allow any type of brick and mortar store in their cities. In fact, most of the cities in Ventura County do not allow them, do not allow brick and mortar facilities, whether it's for recreational purposes or medicinal purposes. Under this new regulation, however, marijuana can be delivered into any of those cities to anyone who requests it. So it's not necessary that you have the brick and mortar. To the mayor's point with respect to that human face-to-face contact, there is an advantage to that. But those who are in need of medical marijuana, this gives them the opportunity. This gives them the access in any city, even if a city has prohibited a brick and mortar store.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, we will go. I just want to add one last thing, and then we have one speaker. My concern is that the state has inundated us. Here we wanted to approach it in a very cautious manner, and the state has taken all of our hard work and just flushed it. And I think it's important, from my perspective, that we instruct the staff to look at procedural options regarding cannabis testing, and also looking for municipal code amendment to address the deliveries. So we have to look at that. But right now we're going to have a speaker. And so Mr. Paul Burns, good to have you back with us. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. As many of you must know or may know, I'm one of the partners of Leaf Dispensary. We were the runner-up to Legendary. And I just want to point out a couple of things. First of all, when you drafted your ordinance, you put in there that if Legendary, who was a successful applicant, didn't execute the agreement with the city by a certain date, that the staff would then immediately go to the second person, which was us, and sign the document or negotiate the agreement. Legendary signed it in the 11th hour. We were ready to come in on Monday morning, and we were told that the previous Friday night that they had come in, finally made an agreement with the city. However, you didn't put anything in the ordinance about getting their doors open within a specified period of time. It's been 7 months since you gave them the permit. They're not open. They're not even through plan check. Then they haven't, from what I heard tonight, even submitted their second plan check for review. This is not what the council intended when they approved the medical marijuana plan. It was supposed to serve the public. The public's not getting served. And so while you're going through your directions to staff, I think you should also amend the ordinance to say that the operator must get their doors open within a reasonable period of time, or you move on to the next applicant who will do it. When we were before you in July, we promised you we'd be open by the end of September, October 1st, and we would have made that date without a problem. However, we weren't given the permit. The council said that we're both qualified applicants, that we both had everything that you wanted, and they chose Legendary, as my understanding, mainly because of the location was preferable over our location. However, having a preferable location that doesn't get open doesn't meet the council's obligation to the public. And so what I'm saying is that we've been ready and willing to open, and I can stand here before you tonight and tell you we could be open in 90 days. That's going through plan check and getting the remodeling done and be open. I'm a contractor. I know what we can do. My partner recently went from permit process to opening the front doors in Lompoc in 65 days. I sent all of you a letter last week, and I'm here to follow up on that letter and ask you to consider amending the ordinance to allow a second license, because the year period is going to be gone, and they're not even going to have their doors open. And the other thing is that we already have all the state licenses. We are already registered. We're already doing the tracking. Everything that you need that's in your ordinance, we already have it. So all I'm asking for is a fair shake, not only for us, but for the public of this community, for the citizens, back up what you promised them and give them a dispensary. And that's all I'm saying is we're ready, willing, and able, and we have the proof.
Okay.
And so I'll leave it at that, but I think we deserve a shot.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. Thank you very much. Well, council discussion. Yeah. Mr. Burns, Councilmember Bill De La Pena has a question for you if you'd like to come on back.
Yes,
Good
I'm
evening,
sorry.
good evening, Mr. Burns. My question is, you are asking for a license or a second license in the city of Thousand Oaks to open your own medical marijuana business. Is it, would you do deliveries?
No. You don't need, delivery is something that people do. The purpose of the medical dispensary is to give the citizen that wants it for medical reasons a choice. They can come into the facility, they can get advice from trained staff. There is a variety of products, different types that serve different needs in the medical industry with cannabis. And so when you pick up the phone and go online and order something, you don't know what you're getting. Yes, it's all tested by the state, okay? But when you go in to a dispensary, you have all these choices, you have all this information, the education, so that the person needing it can make the right decision. And also, it's usually cheaper when you go to a dispensary than when you're paying for online delivery. And a lot of the people that use cannabis are senior citizens that use it, and they don't have the money. So you owe them a facility, whether it's Legendary or us or who, you owe them a dispensary in the city. And the community, the size of this community can support more than two. But I'm just asking for the second one for that reason.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Anyone else have a question for Mr. Burns? That'll do it. Thank you, Mr. Burns.
Okay. Oh, I just might add, if you do go with a delivery, you should strongly think about the regulatory stamp, because otherwise you'll have no control whatsoever.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember De La Pena, did you have another question?
No, I was ready to start discussion.
Okay. Start it.
Well, go. Thank you. I think in our discussion this evening, it's clear that we probably would be, it would be beneficial if we opened or reopened the process for a testing laboratory in Thousand Oaks, given the information that we have people or interested parties willing to do that or willing to apply. So that should definitely be in our recommendations or direction to staff, which is to be. In the meantime, I don't see any reason as to actually, let me go back. I do agree with staff that we should stay the course and wait until staff comes back as soon as possible with options or recommendation on the regulatory permit and business license. And then, yes, come back after the summer recess for an update.
Councilmember Adam?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Mr. Burns, I do appreciate your frustration. I think it's valid. And Legendary has had time, and they need to get this facility open. And I would say to Legendary, if delivery is a stumbling block, I think you can hear from Mr. Burns' testimony tonight and staff that delivery is not obligatory. You can open up a medicinal marijuana facility without delivery capability and serve the community and tailor your delivery of this cannabis to their, these sick people's needs. And there are many ways to ingest cannabis, by the way. Councilmember Jones, it could be edible, it could be, they're even working on ways you can drink it now, but anyway, it's neither here nor there. But I would say one thing council was really clear on when we voted on this, that we wanted to get one up and running before we gave a second permit. And we have yet to do that, but Legendary is in line to be the first one to get it up and running. I will say, and I think the council echoed these sentiments, that we would be perfectly willing to look at a second dispensary depending on how well the first one went. So I think there's still room for that possibility for Leaf. As far as what is in front of us tonight, I would like to make a motion. Could you put that options back up on the board here?
The next step slide.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you. Council also was very interested in a testing facility in the sense that it's just good business. It's a highly paying operation and could employ maybe 15, 20 people. So I do think we should take a look at interest in that. So I'm going to move basically 2 and 3 here, that we do require a regulatory permit. We do require a business tax certificate. I think we owe that to the voters. They were very clear that they wanted to see marijuana taxed in the city of Thousand Oaks, and that we look at these procedural options to hopefully get a testing center open. And if there has been new interest, I would welcome it. I think it's, like I said, good business. And I do think that the initial reason we wanted this was a humanitarian reason to help sick people. And with this new delivery business that's happening, I think that urgency's probably lowered a little bit, because it seems to me that if you're sick, you can order cannabis from your home and it'll be delivered. So as Councilmember Bill DePena said, I think midsummer, if staff comes back to us after working on these 2 options, and also comes back to us when, if you can get any color on delivery and how that's working in the city, and, you know, are people taking advantage of it? In fact, I would almost like you to bring back a couple of the folks that came up here with these very poignant stories about how helpful this drug has been for them, to see if, in fact, they've been able to take advantage of this delivery system. There was one gentleman in particular that mentioned he had to drive to the valley, or somebody had to drive for him. Anyway, if you could bring a few of those folks back, I'd appreciate that too. So I will make that motion and see what my fellow council members think about that.
First, we're going to go with Councilmember Engler and then Councilmember Jones.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to staff for the very good briefing on what has come before and where we need to go now. I was not here when council worked this out last summer, but my compliments to the council for a good attempt at that time based on the information we had. Obviously, the ground has shifted beneath our feet. So I think without a doubt, we need to look at our ordinance and have staff take some ideas and bring them back to us later, on number 2A. And then 2B, if we now have interest in a cannabis testing facility, that also is something we should have some guidance from staff on. In terms of the report back after our summer break, I'd be very interested in the extent of deliveries that are occurring now in Thousand Oaks and that are going to occur as we go forward, and any way that we can monitor those deliveries and get both for regulatory measures and also just for our general knowledge of what and where the marijuana is coming from.
Can I just clarify one thing? With respect to the instructions to staff, I just want to clarify again, tonight's purpose is just a verbal report. So what council can do is, again, direct staff to agendize matters in the future. So I would recommend that, with respect to number 2, with respect to the cannabis delivery regulations and the testing laboratory, you direct staff to come back at a sooner date to have that conversation and provide you with options on whether you want to actually initiate those processes, and then also have another agenda item in the future in accordance with number 3, which is basically a report on what's going on with deliveries. That makes sense to everybody?
Yeah. How soon could staff?
Councilmember Adam.
Oh, sorry. Since I
gotta
made
go.
the motion, I was just going to ask how soon staff could come back with
Well, then I'll let it go.
part one.
Yeah, go ahead. I just didn't want Councilmember Jones to feel left out.
Oh, sorry. I'm just going to get the motion a little clarified, but by
All right,
all
clarify it. Go ahead.
Is it my turn?
Sure.
Are those the only three options that we have here tonight, the ones I see listed on the board?
If you have other options, you're welcome to ask them. Again, for tonight's purposes, the most council can do is ask that staff agendize for consideration other matters related to this issue. So if there's something else that's on your mind, certainly raise it, and I can let you know whether or not it's something that we need to agendize for a future
Well, I think Mr. Burns made a very good point about the size of the city. Maybe it might be fair and equitable to consider maybe a second.
So perhaps
facility.
directing staff to agendize consideration of a second permit in the city.
Well, I think we ought to think about all options. I mean, I would like to echo what Councilman Engler said. I really appreciate all the work you've been through already. And, you know, I'm a late comer, as Bob is, to this process. But, you know, it seems like maybe that's another option we might think about.
Councilmember Adam.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, if we want to, on the timing, you're suggesting that staff come back to us a little bit earlier than midsummer with the regulatory business, municipal code, and when feasibly could you come back to us with that?
Councilmember Adam, or Mayor Pro Tem, I just connected with staff, and we feel fairly confident that we could be back before you no later than May with recommendations and changes in municipal code. And the reason being, it's an extremely fluid environment right now. And so from our standpoint, getting a handle around this sooner rather than later is important. And so we're going to endeavor to get back in front of you just as quickly as we can, because we want to ensure from an enforcement side and from a access side that we have the right regulatory framework in place, and that we are collecting those tax dollars, and that patients are having access to product in an appropriate manner.
Okay. Well, then let me amend the motion. Come back to us in May with the business about the regulatory permit and the business certificate and the municipal code amendment. And then, you know, at your discretion, maybe midsummer, if you can bring us something on, you know, how delivery's working here in Thousand Oaks, that would be fine. And as far as the second dispensary, that's always on the table. I'm not sure we have to actually agendize that, but
Well, at this point, I mean, you would have to direct. You'd have to direct staff to bring it back for council consideration. As it is right now, council voted to approve just one facility.
That's
So if
right.
there's a desire to consider two, then council would have to go through that process to vote to allow a second operation.
And the other piece that council will need to contemplate at that time, and we'll be sure to remind you of this is obviously a very competitive marketplace, and we still receive calls on a regular basis from interested parties. So there would probably be significant pressure on the council to open up a full process again, given that there's been considerable time that has elapsed since the original. So just there's a variety of things for council to consider in that regard. And I want to remind council, because it's my responsibility as your administrator, is this is extremely laborious, time-consuming process.
It is.
And so we're certainly happy to pursue whatever council's direction is, but just knowing
Would
that
it be
there's,
that time-consuming, since we already have a second approved candidate, and if we approve a second location, they would move into that position? We've already done the legwork. Why would we have to bring in a whole bunch of other people to interview?
That'd be the council's decision. I'm simply eliminating the point that I would anticipate that there's going to be others that pressure you otherwise.
Right.
well, yeah, if we were going to entertain the notion of a second facility, to be fair, we would, I believe we'd have to open up the RFP process again, honestly. I mean, since we went through the first process, things have changed. And so what I would say, We do here. I'll stick with my original motion, my amended motion, that staff comes back to us in May and then midsummer. And in the interim, we'll see how Legendary does. Because don't forget, that was one of the big things that we were looking at, the location that Legendary offered us and how they would function as to whether or not we would want a second dispensary.
Understood.
That
Okay.
make sense?
Yep.
All right. Well, then that's the motion on the floor.
Do you want to speak before we? Okay. Councilmember.
I know that Councilmember Adam echoed the exact same words almost as I stated when I said we want to open it up for a discussion with recommendations. We're still discussing it. So my question is, we entered into a contract with Legendary. They have until the end of the year to open up a shop or not. Is there a legal way where we could terminate this contract?
So I'll probably turn it over to Assistant City Attorney Patrick He here, but it's my understanding, again, there's a difference between the permit and it's not a contract, it's an operations agreement. So the operations agreement itself is for a 5-year period.
That is correct.
The permit, however, is for 1 year. And so they need to be, it terminates on December 30th. And in
Correct.
order for them to continue operating, they would have to apply for and receive another permit. So if they haven't opened up their facility by the end of December, I think under the ordinance, we would not be issuing a new permit.
That is correct. However, what would preclude the city from entering into a different operations agreement simply because they have not held up their end of the bargain? So what are our legal options?
Well, it'd be difficult to go through the whole thing for legal options that would we discuss on the dais at this point. But I will say that the operations agreement, again, is a mutual understanding of the benefits that we would have. There are situations that would trigger termination. There's also situations where we would have a mutual discussion to amend the contract or to agree to terminate the contract, as both parties agree could do that. But to get into whether certain things would trigger termination, we had to look at specific circumstances. We certainly aren't there at this point.
At this point, they have not violated the terms of their permit.
Okay, so we'll have to wait until there's a breach of some sort. I see. Okay, I'm just wondering because the clock is ticking. So say they never open up shop until by the end of the year. Does it then automatically go to the runner-up, or do we then, if you could clarify for me again, do we start the process again?
So we would come back to the city council and get direction from city council as to whether or not you wanted to start the process all over again, whether you wanted us to not have, basically stop. At that point, you might determine that deliveries are sufficient and we don't need a brick and mortar location in the city, or you might direct us to move on to the second operator, which was Leaf. So you have a myriad of options at that time.
And
Thank
if I
you.
just, Councilmember Bedla-Pena, if I might just add one additional point, just for clarification for the public as well. The council followed a very open, transparent process. They awarded a license. Staff negotiated within the time frame laid out. Operations agreement was executed. Staff turned around plans in a matter of days on the initial review. And I went back and watched the testimony in preparation for tonight's hearing. And it was very clear, first of all, that location was a primary driver. And secondarily, I think the question was actually asked that evening about opening. And it was at that time intended before end of calendar year. So it's certainly unusual that we would have gone through the efforts, and you would expect someone that you're handing a business operations ticket to, that they would open their business in that location. So from that standpoint, sort of contemplating where we are today, it's certainly unusual, but the ball is clearly in the court of the operator and not the city.
Well, I just want to add before we decide what we're going to do, requesting of the staff that, the Red Cross method for entering into cold water is a little bit at a time, and it's almost like the state has just pushed us into the pool. And I think there's now, I don't use cannabis. I don't think it's the miracle drug, but I recognize that it's been thrust upon us by the state. And I think the wisest thing is we need to have a brick and mortar that can be described to the patients coming in. They can get questions answered because we're already being inundated as a city by delivery. We need to regulate that, and I think we need to approach it. And so as we ask the staff to go back, one of the things I personally would like them to consider is a second brick and mortar if these other folks are dragging their feet. I don't get it. So that's something I'd like to see happen, but that's up to the council. So does anyone want to add to the motion, or do we want to? Councilmember Adam, you had the motion. You want to put it forward as you see fit?
The motion stands, and we can vote.
Okay.
Do you have something, Claudia?
Can you repeat the motion in its entirety?
I was afraid you're going to ask me
Because I
that.
know that Mr. Jones and now we have Mayor McCoy also wanting information regarding a second license.
Put the option screen back up for me, would you please?
It's over it.
I can't read it from here. The motion would be to act on steps 2 and 3 there, and staff will get back to us in May or thereabouts about a municipal code amendment to address cannabis deliveries, the regulatory permit business, the business tax certificate, because as I mentioned, I think the voters want marijuana taxed, and we're going to make sure that happens. And we would ask staff to come back as far as a cannabis testing laboratory and find out what options we need to establish one of those in the city as well. And that would pardon me, one more part, and then maybe around midsummer, you get back to us just to how, the efficacy of this whole delivery business that we've been looking at, if you can somehow gauge that, is it working in Thousand Oaks, and what are the results?
What about Councilmember Jones and Mayor McCoy's suggestion that staff come back with information regarding a second license?
Well, and how,
I would be content.
We already have that information, don't we? I mean, it would be in what respect? They have a permit till December 31st. We've stated over and over that we want to see one business established before we establish the second one. I mean, the question remains is if we were to, give a second license, would it be fair to open up the RFP process again so everybody had a shot at it? But I'm not sure that that's what we're really talking about tonight. I mean, yes, I understand Legendary should be open by now. I agree with you. Mr. Burns has a right to be frustrated with that. And I'm just hoping that Legendary's listening right now.
I think the city is equally frustrated.
Yes. And
Mayor McCoy, I'll leave it up to you.
I think we do need a medicinal marijuana facility. I hope Legendary understands that it doesn't necessarily obligate them to deliver, because as I understand it, that's one of Legendary's potential problems, this whole delivery thing. We don't have to deliver. In fact, from listening to the testimony tonight, it seems that to have a medicinal facility, it's best for the patient to actually go there to get some advice and look at the different options, to be there, physically. So, Legendary needs to get a move on.
Well, the motion's been stated, so you want to prepare a vote, Madam Clerk?
The motion carries 5-0.
All right. Item number 10, Planning Commission and Traffic and Transportation Advisory Commission appointments for Councilmember Adam, Councilmember Bill de la Pena, Councilmember Engler, Councilmember Jones, I'll have each of the council members, if you'd like, to give brief description of your recommendations tonight. Very brief, please. Brief is the operative word. Councilmember Adam, would you bat lead off for us?
I will. Thank you, Mayor.
And again, brief.
Brief. You got it. My planning commissioner, Doug Nichols, was elected to Conejo-Reckon Park District Board, so I need a new planning commissioner. We went through the application process. I read all the applications. I interviewed a number of people, and I was most impressed with Mr. Kevin Cohen. I not know Kevin before this whole application process. I have no direct ties with him. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know who Doug Nichols was either, for that matter, which is actually, I think, kind of good. Kevin is a senior environmental planner. He works on land usage, particularly in the environmental sense. He's worked on green infrastructure projects, water usage, open space conservation. He's got a master's in urban planning. And by interviewing him, he understands we have to protect our environment, but it's a balance. We have to have some growth as well. And he's a man capable of making that balance work, I believe. He's also a millennial, and I know we've used that word quite a bit. I think we need some young people on the Planning Commission. Us baby boomers aren't going to be around forever, and neither is the greatest generation. So yeah, we need people that have experience and that are interested in participating in the running of the city. And I know Mr. Cohen's very interested in that. So I am nominating him for the Planning Commission.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Jones, would you like to?
Yes, being guided by your instruction about being brief, I think Nelson Buss is highly qualified, graduate of T.O. High, been in this city all his life, and let me just leave it at that. I think he'll be an excellent planning commissioner.
You know what? You know what the word brief means. Thank you. And Traffic Commissioner, would you like to introduce your Traffic Commissioner, Councilmember Jones?
Yes, I met Mr. Emmel in walking door-to-door campaigning, and later I spoke to Councilwoman De La Pena, and I asked her opinion also, and she said she believed that he was highly qualified, and so I take great pleasure in nominating Mr. Emmel.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember De La Pena?
I am renominating my planning commissioner, David Newman, who has an excellent record of scrutinizing every project and going through everything with a fine-toothed comb. Has no ties to any local construction companies, property owners, or anything like that. And I am also going to renominate my traffic commissioner, Angie Simpson, and they both have been serving well. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. And Councilmember Engler.
Thank you, Mayor. I went through the book of 31 people who put their names in to serve our city. And I was in awe of their abilities and their willingness to step forward. And I thank them all for having put their names forward. That said, I decided to stay with a couple of the incumbents in traffic, Rick Lemo, who's been a traffic commissioner for some years now, and also Sharon McMahon for planning. My thoughts are that we do have a lot coming down our pipe here pretty soon, and I wanted to have some experienced people in those positions.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Engler. I'm looking for a motion to approve both slates.
Also move.
Ms. Rodriguez, would you like to prepare the vote?
The motion carries 5-0.
Well, congratulations to our now new planning commissioners and previously acting planning commissioners who are continuing to serve, and also to the Traffic Commission. Welcome aboard. we move on to, yes, that's it. I'll clap for you. That's wonderful. You waded through a lengthy meeting. Thank you very much for doing that and for your service to the community. There's nothing for item 11. Item number 12, follow-up reports for conferences attended, and that would be the new Mayors and Council Members Academy. Councilmember Engler, you want to give us a report on that?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. First, thank you to the citizens and thank you to the council and staff for helping me get down to Irvine earlier this month for the new councilperson and mayor's academy. It was a very interesting 3 days down in Irvine. We were able to discuss with our neighbors. We had several people from Moore Park, several from Oxnard, several from Camarillo, several from Port Hueneme, all at the same location. So I was able to interact and network with our local neighboring council people. There's a couple of things that we took away from the breakout sessions. There were some very good breakout sessions. A couple of them mandatory in that there was ethics and harassment awareness training. That's a mandatory aspect, and I was glad to get those done as well. But the parts that I came away with was a couple of very good explanations of city budgeting and city revenue sources that were expertly explained to me, and it was a good refresher for me having had some experience in municipal finance. But in terms of land use, there was one breakout session that talked about Governor Newsom's commitment, and I think we've all seen in the paper lately the lawsuits that are starting to come out against other cities in California concerning land use, and the governor is also offering quite a bit of money to help us with some of our housing needs. That $500 million in tax credits, moderate income $500 million that he's put aside. So there's some carrot as well as to the stick that he's bringing forward. In terms of things to worry about or think about coming down the line, last year there was a Senate bill, I believe, that was going to mandate some housing near transit. That bill has been reintroduced under a new header. It will also be decided this year at the Assembly, at the Senate. And there's also another Senate bill to upzone areas near transit that also is out there. There's the auxiliary dwelling units. There's also legislation being proposed to limit the local agencies, thereby us, to be able to regulate those even further. So there's some clouds on the horizon as far as some of the legislation that may be coming down that I'm sure we will be addressing. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Could I make a comment?
Yep.
I know I've been around a while, and I've been on boards and councils and so forth where members went to meetings and said, I've never seen such a thorough report in all my time. You've set a standard for someone going to a meeting and then making a report. I mean, that's going to be awfully, I don't know if I want to go to any meetings if I have to live up to that standard that you have set. But just, Bob, I'd like to really compliment you on the thoroughness of that report. It was excellent.
Well, thank you, Councilmember Jones. Going to these seminars and learning is a gift given, as I said, by the citizens to us. And I think that the citizens deserve a little bit in return for that. So thank you.
Well, you've shown it with that report.
Well, obviously, by the accolades you've received, there will be no one standing in the way of receiving your report. So I think we can move on.
Hear, hear.
All right, City Manager, would you have some follow-up items?
Thank you so much, Mayor McCoy. Just quickly, our next regular city council meeting will be on the 26th of February. Currently, we have 2 special presentations slated for that evening. Newbury Park High School Boys Cross Country Team CIF, Division II State Cross Country Champions. They'll be recognized here. Proclamation for Read Across America Day, and we're potentially targeting one additional one that may be coming together. Under department reports, we will hear an update on the general plan and housing element that was discussed at our previous meeting. And you will have a residential pre-screen for a 50-unit complex in Newbury Park called Park Place Villas that will come before the council as a department report. You also have a study session on user fees. That is it for that meeting so far.
All right, well, then that will bring us to adjournment and until our next regularly scheduled meeting for February 28th. Good night, everybody. 26th. That too, 26th. Good night, everybody.